microplastics in me. Because of the pandemic currently going around, I wasn't able to attend a live book launch, so that's why I created this video for you. This book talks about my personal journey in creating my science fair project, where I'm focusing on targeting the location of where very small pieces of plastics known as microplastics are on the ocean floor. The reason why I decided to focus on microplastics is because despite the fact that there's a lot of attention on those great big garbage patches with things like plastic bags and plastic water bottles, because these microplastics are so much smaller, scientists don't actually know where they are. But this book isn't just about my science fair project or about microplastics awareness. It also has things about the scientific thinking that went behind my project. We currently live in a global society, and it's important for us to solve all of these big world problems by working together with the most amount of STEM knowledge that we can possibly have. I thought I'd read a bit of my book for you. My loyal companion, Andy, came over to lie beside me. I'd always seen Andy, who's a German Shepherd, as a part of the family. In fact, Andy, or Andy in Chinese, means Anna's little brother. I was absent-mindedly rubbing his ears when I noticed something next to his head, partly covered in sand. It looked like another piece of sea glass. It was an even brighter blue than the piece I just collected. However, as I picked it up and brushed the sand off, it started to feel wrong. The color was too sharp, too bright, too artificial. It didn't reflect the sun in a way characteristic of glass. It was also way too thin, and it didn't weigh enough for a piece of glass that big. In fact, it didn't feel like sea glass at all. It felt like a piece of plastic. And here's a little bit from the end of my book. When it finally came to the awards ceremony, I could feel my heart beating in my chest. All the honorable mentions were announced, then third place, and then second place. Every name that was announced made my breath come faster. And then finally, last but not least, in first place, Anna Du. A breath that I didn't realize I was holding rushed out of me. My parents were clapping in the audience. That day, on the way home in the car, still reveling in my victory, I thought back to what that judge had said. She wasn't the only judge who had suggested next steps. Many of the judges had mentioned I should scale my project up, including artificial intelligence, and just make it overall more autonomous. The entire science fair helped me in a way that I never would have imagined when I started this process. In the beginning, I was just trying to finish a science fair project while doing something that really interested me. But the science fair got me doing all sorts of experiments and thinking about the way science applied to my everyday life. I like to think I learned how to think like a scientist, constantly designing my experiments and trying to see the world from a science-like point of view. Because a lot of us are going to be staying at home, I decided to show you how to do one of my favorite activities, which you guys can do at home as well. And it's a magic density bottle. So what we have here is two different types of plastics that are in a specific chemical environment so that when shaken up, they'll separate and then slowly come back together. My project has a lot to do with density, and I know that when we think about plastics, a lot of what we think about are those floating types of plastics. But as these plastics undergo different types of chemical changes, their density will increase, causing them to sink to the ocean floor. So for today's activity, what we'll need is a standard TSA-approved shampoo bottle. We'll need, really you should use distilled water, but if you absolutely can't find any, regular tap water should work fine. We'll need isopropyl alcohol, and you'll notice over here that it says it's 91% alcohol. It's very important that it has a high percentage of alcohol. You'll need two different types of beads. What I have are melty beads and pony beads, but really you can just experiment with any two different types of plastics. You'll need a scale, a funnel, two different colored dyes, and kosher salt. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to fill the bottom half of this container with distilled water. And then we're going to measure out 10 grams of salt. After that, we're going to pour the salt into the distilled water. Close the cap and shake it to make sure that the salt is fully saturated. You'll notice that in the beginning the water is very cloudy, but the more you shake it, the clearer it'll get. After all the salt has dissolved, you can add in a drop or two of dye. And then you can shake it again to make sure that the dye is fully within the water. After that, you want to fill in the rest of the container with the isopropyl alcohol. And now you want to wait for the alcohol to set. After that, you can add the two different types of beads. You want to make sure that there's an entire layer on the bottom before moving on to the next type of bead. And there you have it, your own magic density bottle. Cool.
Get your copy of Microplastics and Me at tumblehomebooks.org. Royalties from this book go to Anna Dew's Deep Plastic Initiative. For more information on this nonprofit initiative, visit deepplastics.org.